The rain hadn't been in the forecast. It came anyway, soft at first, whispering over the white tints like a secret too fragile to hold, then harder, drumming against crystal glassware and staining the silk aisle runner with inkblot patterns. Inside the great garden hall of the Velen estate, a place that smelled of old money, manicured lilacs, and fading legacies, the music faltered as the storm arrived. The guests whispered, leaned in, exchanged glances. The string quartet paused, bows midair. Still, the bride stood radiant, trembling, a vision in ivory satin that clung to her like memory. Her name was Lena. 28. Daughter of no one important. She looked straight ahead, eyes trained on a man, with a jaw chiseled from expectation and eyes cold as bank vaults. Alexander Velen. The groom. He didn't look at her. Not really. His gaze hovered somewhere above her head, as if he were waiting for someone else to walk down the aisle. The priest cleared his throat. You may now kiss the bride. A pause. Longer than it should have been. Eyes widened. The guests leaned forward in the way people do when a car crash is about to happen, but hasn't yet. Lena smiled, barely, a reflex more than a feeling. She tilted her face up. Alexander didn't move. A beat passed. Then another. His jaw ticked. His mouth flattened. No, he said. Just that. One syllable that cracked across the room like a whip. I'm sorry. I can't. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was crowded, with breath held too long, with judgment, with the ghost of 100 Instagram posts that wouldn't be made. Lena's face didn't fall. It stayed frozen in that half smile, but her hands trembled so slightly only the lace veil registered it. Somewhere in the crowd, someone whispered her name. Then someone else gasped. The sound of the storm grew louder, as if the sky itself had flinched. Alexander stepped back, eyes flicking to his father, seated in the front row, stone-faced. Lena turned slowly, dreamlike, as if she'd suddenly remembered where she was. Her eyes scanned the room, not for comfort, but for something real, something solid she could anchor to. That's when the doors opened. Not dramatically, not like a movie. Just opened. And he walked in. Dark suit, soaked from the rain. No umbrella. No announcement. Just a man with shoulders broad enough to carry a broken world, and a silence that wrapped around him like armor. Some people turned. Most didn't recognize him. But Lena did. Her breath caught. Not the way it does when you're startled, but the way it does when a dam inside you finally breaks. It was her driver. Or that's what they called him. The one who'd picked her up from the charity auction where she met Alexander. The one who'd driven her to fittings, to dinners, to rehearsals. The one who knew when she needed music and when she needed silence. The one who never looked at her the way others did, like a lucky stray plucked from obscurity. He looked at her like she belonged. He paused at the edge of the aisle. His name was Micah. The rain clung to him, dripping from his hair, soaking through his shirt. He looked, for one exquisite moment, like a man who had come too late to stop a tragedy. But his eyes never left hers. Not even once. Not even when Alexander stepped forward and hissed, "What the hell is he doing here?" Not when the guests began murmuring louder. Not even when Lena's mother, in pearls too tight around her throat, rose halfway from her seat and whispered, "Oh my God!" Lena moved first. Her bouquet hit the ground with a soft thud, roses bruising on impact. She walked down the aisle toward Micah, past her groom, past the priest, past the 100 pairs of eyes that didn't understand, couldn't understand, wouldn't understand. Her dress dragged through the rain pooling on the marble floor. Each step felt like waking up from a sleep she hadn't known she was in. Alexander's voice came from behind her. Cold. Controlled. "Lena! Come back here! Don't do this!" She didn't stop. Not until she stood in front of Micah. Not until she reached out, tentative, afraid he might not be real, and touched the edge of his sleeve. You shouldn't have come, she said, voice breaking around the edges. I told you not to come. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. His presence was the answer. She looked up at him, into those rain-slick eyes. And something inside her, something locked and aching and old, exhaled. Behind her, the guests erupted. Some in outrage, some in disbelief, some in curiosity sharpened by schadenfreude. Flashbulbs went off. People would say a lot of things about this moment. That she had a breakdown. That it was staged. That she was always the gold digger they thought she was. But none of them would know what Lena knew. That this moment, this choice, wasn't about leaving Alexander. It was about choosing herself. Choosing truth, even if it came soaked in rain and scandal. Micah finally spoke, low and hoarse, like gravel under wheels. Say the word, he said, and I'll leave. She stared at him, then shook her head. Just once. No words. Just breath. Just rain. And the sound of something ancient and beautiful, like a life unbreaking, beginning to stir. A low murmur pulsed through the hall, like a heartbeat skipped. Someone's laugh, nervous and wrong, someone else swearing under their breath. The click of an ant's heels backing away from the spectacle unfolding like a slow, elegant implosion. Alexander stood frozen, eyes glassy with the kind of disbelief that doesn't come from shock, but from humiliation. He hadn't just lost her, he had lost control. Lena's mother sat down too quickly, knees buckling, her breath coming in shallow gasps, mascara already streaking. Micah felt it then, the shift. A line crossed. He was no longer invisible. No longer the polite silence behind the steering wheel. He was in the frame now, a threat, a trespasser in a world that had never wanted him to exist beyond the periphery. But he didn't flinch. Not when Alexander barked orders to the security staff. Not when 3 men in black suits stepped forward, unsure, hesitant. They had seen Micah before, passed him in hallways, nodded, maybe pitied him. But now he was something else. He raised his hand slowly, not in surrender, but in clarity. I'm not here to fight, he said, his voice carrying more weight than any punch could have. I'm here because someone needed to tell her the truth. The room went quiet again, the way it does before something breaks. Lena turned to face them all. Her dress clung wet to her body, heavy with water, with history. No one asked me what I wanted, she said, softly, almost like she was remembering rather than accusing. Not once. Not when the engagement was announced in a press release before I even said yes. Not when the planner picked the color of the flowers based on shareability. Not when I asked for time. She paused, breathing through the tightness in her chest, and was told I was being ungrateful. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't have to. The quiet was its own amplifier. He listened. That's it. That's all he did. And it was more than anyone else here. Alexander stepped forward now, the mask cracking. You think this is love? He snapped. You think he loves you? He doesn't care about you. He cares about winning. About taking what's mine. His voice was raw, serrated. You think he didn't plan this? You think he just showed up? He's been circling like a parasite since the day you got here. Micah's jaw tightened. He wanted to speak, to shout. But he didn't. Not yet. Not until Lena turned to him and whispered, Tell them. So he did. He stepped forward, eyes sweeping the crowd, not with defiance, but with something harder to name. A quiet rage that had fermented for too long. I didn't plan this, he said. She asked me to stay away. And I tried. God knows I tried. But you don't get it. You all see her as a possession. A victory. A photo op. But I saw her, *C* her. And she deserves more than being a bargaining chip between old money and new ambition. He paused, looking at Alexander now. You think I came to take what's yours. But she was never yours to begin with. The tension snapped. Alexander lunged, fists clenched, but was caught by his uncle and one of the guards. "Don't!" the uncle hissed, eyes darting to the press already lining up by the glass doors, phones raised. "Not here! Not now!" But it was too late. The story had already bled out of the room. A bridesmaid whispered something into her phone. A groomsman laughed, sharp, bitter, and poured himself another drink. The guests, once hungry for perfection, were now starving for scandal. Lena looked at her mother, who looked away. She looked at her father, silent, complicit, small, and something inside her fractured into clarity. She turned back to Micah. "We have to go." He nodded. But they didn't run. They walked, hand in hand, through the parted crowd, through the stormlit air, through the ruins of a wedding that had never been hers. But the fight was only beginning. Because the next morning, the world came for them. Tabloids called it a betrayal. A stunt. Micah was painted as a manipulator. Lena, as unstable, hysterical, a fallen angel. Old employers of his surfaced, offering vague, half-true comments. The Velen family released a statement. "We wish Lena well in her search for personal clarity." The legal team followed. Micah was served with a restraining order. Allegations of inappropriate contact fabricated in legalese. A security report was leaked. Lena was cut off from her joint accounts. Her phone, once paid for by the estate, was disconnected. Her apartment, technically in Alexander's name, now had locks changed. They met in cheap diners and walked in silence down unfamiliar streets, stripped of safety, of warmth. They were not tragic lovers. They were hunted, broke, tired. And still, neither of them looked back. Until the lawsuit came. Fraud. Breach of contract. Emotional distress. Lena was being sued for the cost of the wedding, $312,000. Alexander's legal team wanted a trial. Not to win, but to shame. And Micah, unemployed now, was being investigated for improper use of privileged access, a claim that came with possible jail time. It wasn't about money. It was about power. About a machine with teeth, built to grind down anyone who said no. Lena sat across from Micah in a basement apartment lent to them by an old friend, lit only by a lamp with no shade. Her eyes were swollen, not from crying, but from not crying. The grief had settled too deep now. "We won't win," she said. "Not in court. Not in the media." Micah nodded. He looked thinner, more worn. "Then we don't fight on their terms," he said. His voice was hoarse. "We make them play on ours." She looked at him. There was something in his face now. Not hope. Not exactly. But a sharp, clean fury. The kind that builds houses in ruins. "They think we're already broken," he said. "Let's use that." And with that, he rose. He opened a drawer. Pulled out a file. Names. Numbers. Photos. Not revenge. Truth. Truth weaponized. Not for spectacle, but for survival. Outside, the rain had stopped. But the air still smelled like thunder. And Lena, barefoot on the cold floor, whispered, "Let's begin." The courthouse smelled like old paper and too much air conditioning. The kind of place where time didn't pass, it waited. Lena sat on the wooden bench outside courtroom 3B, her hands folded neatly in her lap, a coffee cup cooling untouched beside her. Micah hadn't arrived yet. She didn't expect him to. Not after everything. The trial had gone quiet, like a war moving underground. The tabloids had moved on, the hashtags faded, and the Velen name, protected by its own rot, had withdrawn like a wound closing over. But the damage remained. Lena had stood her ground. She hadn't countersued. Hadn't gone to the press. She told the truth, under oath, without dramatics. And maybe that's why it worked. The judge dismissed the lawsuit. Cited lack of legal grounds and apparent retaliatory intent. It didn't make headlines. Just a line in a legal brief. a ripple in a pond already still. Lena walked out of the courtroom alone. No applause. Just the low hum of city noise returning to her ears. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just breathed, fully, for the first time in weeks. A clean, raw breath. She took the long way home. Past the river. Past the street where the dress shop used to be. Past the hotel where they'd held the engagement dinner, the waiters in white gloves serving champagne with practiced indifference. She stopped at a corner where the light was slow to change. That's where she saw him. Across the street. Standing beside his motorcycle, helmet in hand. No words. Just eyes. Older. Tired. Alive. He stepped off the curb when the light changed. Not with urgency. Just presence. They stood at arm's length apart, the wind teasing her hair, the city's gray light dulling the edges of everything. "You won," he said. She shook her head. "No. I ended it." He nodded. He understood. "I'm leaving the city," he said. "I got offered a job. Out west. It's honest work." "That sounds right," she said. She looked down at his hands. The same hands that used to hold the steering wheel like it was something sacred. "Thank you," she said, "for seeing me. Always," he said. And she believed him. He didn't ask her to come. She didn't ask him to stay. They didn't need to. Some people walk you to the edge of the fire and then disappear into the smoke. He turned to leave, but paused. "Take care, Lena." She smiled. Small. Honest. "You too, Micah." He crossed the street again. She watched until the helmet was on, and the bike started with a cough of breath and oil. He didn't look back. She didn't wave. The bike disappeared into traffic, into motion, into the kind of distance that isn't cruel. It's just life. Lena stood there a moment longer. Then she walked. Slowly. No destination. Just forward. A woman in a borrowed coat, her own name stitched quiet into the lining. Above her, the sky was the color of slate, unremarkable, but dry. The wind lifted a paper bag into the air, spinning it once before letting it fall. A beginning disguised as an ending. Or maybe the other way around.